we all know there is a massive problem in the structure of the fiat economy. And we all know everybody is getting screwed and some people are getting more screwed than others. Does why it's happening matter? Or should we, like, if we could have you two duke it out, but really in the end, is it more important to know how we fix it? I'll start with you, Jeff.
Oh, it's always more important how you fix it. But it does matter what's wrong because we have to get from A to B. So even if you have the best solution in
B, A to B?
I know what B starts
We know what
with
B stands for.
Yes. Isn't there a couple lines?
It's from F to B.
It's what?
It's from F to F, F for Freddy to B.
But we still have to get there. In order to get there, you have to figure out where we are, what we're actually doing. So in order to get from A, the asshole system that we have now, to B, whatever that ends up being, we have to know something about the assholes.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And the one thing we've always agreed on is that the Eurodollar system's like absolutely fucked.
Yeah.
Basically, that's the one that we
There's no argument there.
Yeah.
I've never heard you swear
I
like
did
this.
it this time. We've been on opposite sides of debates. We've been on absolute opposite sides of debates sometimes, but it's basically that's a common point where the details matter. Number one is if you're an investor, especially in traditional asset classes, and you want to know whether inflation or deflation is going to happen. There are obviously multiple factors. I mean, things ranging from, AI, for example, is a recent variable that we all have to consider. But money creation and what defines money is one of those key things. And so, for example, I've had good calls on markets, I've had bad calls on markets, but one of my highest conviction and most useful calls was this kind of stuff is going to be inflationary and avoid bonds. And we had 2022 was the worst year ever for bonds, basically. Bond bulls have been like devastated. And getting into hard assets has been a useful strategy during that money printing environment. I mean, once it started to roll over, we had to make different calls. But that's where getting it right matters. If you're an investor and you don't know if it's going to be higher inflation or deflation, that will affect the returns. If you should buy value stocks versus bonds, if you should buy Bitcoin versus bonds, if you should buy gold versus bonds, or some sort of combination thereof, and how to weight it, that's relevant. And then, number two, it's about finding the next system. And that's why, obviously, an unusually large percentage of my time is on the solution, the B.
Can I add one more thing here? Just because one part that's important. Again, we agree on that. The Eurodollar system is total bullshit, and it's. But the reason we need to focus still on that is because you need to know your enemy. You need to know who is going to resist changing a structural monetary framework. And the Eurodollar is not central banks. It's the large cartel of banks. And they're the ones that are the most vocal critics nowadays of cryptocurrencies, digital currencies, and Bitcoin. So you have to know your enemy to a certain extent because they're going to fight tooth and nail to preserve their own monetary privilege.
Jeff, what could you describe the kind of money that you think we need that would fix the system? Like, what would be a perfect money? What attributes would it have?
You mean something like a physical standard or?
Well, no, anything. What are the attributes of a good money?
I think a good, just big picture terms, nothing specific here.
Nothing specific.
No, just big picture terms. You want a system that's able to dynamically match money supply and money demand, right? Because those are dynamic forces that change all the time. And the way to best, most efficiently do that will lead to the best, most efficient economic outcomes, which is what we're really doing here because money is nothing more than a tool for the commercial system, or it's supposed to be, not a position of political power and privilege, which is what it's become. So as any kind of system that kind of fits the needs there of both of those requirements, where you have supply meeting demand without creating too many frictions and doing so in a way that can change through time, because the monetary system, the real economy is always constantly being rewritten. It also needs to be flexible enough to meet with the changing periods. So yes, I'm describing the Eurodollar system, unfortunately. So obviously it's the same sort of attributes, it's just not run by a cartel of large banks.
Can I ask, so who here wants to hold money for which you don't know the supply of? Any takers?
Jeff, why's your hand not up?
Because why wouldn't you know what the supply is? I'm not arguing for the euro dollar. The euro dollar sucks.
So I guess the bigger point I'm trying to get to is that when you ask perfect money, what is perfect money or what is ideal money, you'll get very different answers from, say, the people who want to issue that money or people who are academically inclined and systematically inclined and think like, what is if I were to design the system, what I would make it like? It'd be like dynamically adjusting, and it would. Whereas like if you're the user of the money, your answer is I want the money that's going to appreciate over time. I know the supply. I know the rules. The rules are not going to be rug pulled on me. I want to be able to bring it anywhere in the world. I want nobody to be able to dilute it. I want nobody able to just take it from me, especially easily, just like with a push of a button. And I want it to be fast, and I want it to be secure. And so you get actually very different answers to that question if you're kind of looking at it from a user perspective. You hear like a dynamically adjusting system, and users are like, no, I don't want that. I just want to hold hard money. Whereas if you're a central banker, if you're a normal banker, if you're an academic, if you're a monetary historian, you're like, hey, we need this kind of system that's going to meet all these different requirements. And it just doesn't take off because users don't want that money. And I think that's where I go to the Austrian view that money is an emergent phenomenon. And even when you have top-down designs of money, like fiat currencies, it's not an accident that some of those monies are accepted in other countries and ones are not. So there's a reason that the dollar is accepted in more places than the yuan. There's a reason that, like the Nigerian currency is not accepted everywhere. There's a reason that certain currencies are accepted more often than others, and it's because those are actually kind of free market choices. So, for example, when my family in Egypt, when they like hold physical cash dollars, they're making a choice. No one's telling. Like in America, we kind of have to use dollars, but when you're in Egypt, you could hold yuan, you could hold something else, you could hold Egyptian pound. That's the easiest one to do, but they're making a decision to hold dollars. Let alone obviously gold, Bitcoin, all these others. And so money's at its root really an emergent phenomenon, but that even includes attempts at top-down money creation.
But why are they choosing to hold dollars? That's the question. Because dollars are usable. And dollars become usable and became usable, not because they're fixed or everybody knows their supply, but because they became widely accepted everywhere because they were everywhere. And the only way they could be everywhere was because it was elastic.
I would say, ironically, it's because it was the most decentralized system they had. So, for example, one of the kind of the features of the Federal Reserve is that it was like this weird agreement to make it half public and half private. It's like the president can't just call up the head of the central bank and change the rules, right? There's actually kind of a set of balances, and it takes pretty extreme intervention to actually centralize it. And so, one is that the United States has. No country has perfect rule of law, but the United States has one of the better, more consistent rules of law, right? So China can rug pull you more easily than the United States can. In a broad sense, you're more likely to get rug pulled. And you have closed capital accounts and things like that. And so the combination of being the largest military power, largest economic power, biggest liquidity, and then some reasonable degree of rule of law and decentralization so that there's no one person that can just print a ton of money. It's the fiscal lever exists, the central bank lever exists, the commercial banking lever exists, and these are kind of in this sort of delicate dance that has allowed it to maintain for decades. It's actually that rules-based system, even though the rules aren't as solid as something like Bitcoin, for example, there's some degree of rules to it, and that's partially what made it trust globally.
But Lynn, you just said that as the eurodollar was being accepted, the eurodollars were being created all over the place. Nobody knew what the supply was. Nobody knew what it was. In fact, to this day, nobody knows what it was. Yet the eurodollar came to be the dominant form of currency anyway. And the reason is because you guys can go. I can go visit you in Australia and take a little piece of plastic out of my pocket, stick it into a computer, and get goods and services with it. Because the eurodollar is usable in lots and lots and lots and lots of places, in lots and lots and lots of ways. And you're right. The point about courts of law in particular, that's probably one of the foundational arguments for using the dollar to begin with. But by and large, it became acceptable because it became available. And so if you don't have a currency that's available, it's not usable. And people will choose to use a medium that's accessible to them. And if it's not accessible, they can't use it whether they like it or not, or whether they know it or not.
I think you're actually right. I've experienced that traveling the world, and a lot of places will accept the dollar. But there is one currency that is accepted in every single country in the world from a mobile phone, and there's only one. That's
It's a
Bitcoin.
smile, right?
It's a Bitcoin. So where you can't get on the, so for example, if you're in Iran, you can't accept digital. You can't use your plastic card there. It's not accepted.
Yeah, but I'm talking more micro granule scale. Because can I go buy a drink here with Bitcoin?
If they accept it, yeah. And if they
See,
don't,
Peter,
if they
if there's
If they-
too many ifs with Bitcoin currency.
Well, no, I
but
mean,
that's the thing. The dollar system pervaded everything. It penetrated everywhere precisely because the banks were incentivized to do that.
But I don't disagree. I think the point I'm making is that we have this new emergent system, Bitcoin, that's growing. If they don't accept Bitcoin, I can have them accept it within about 3 minutes. No, but you can teach them to.
Exactly.
And the thing is, we didn't bring you here to stitch you up. You're one of the most popular guests we've had in the last 2 years. People love you. Like when we've made the shows with you, people are like, Jeff's amazing. But when the first time we had you on, which was in Austin, yeah,
No, it was here in
I
Miami.
was here in Miami.
Was it here in Miami? Anyway, people said to us, Jeff described his perfect money, and you basically described Bitcoin. You kind of described Bitcoin,
Except for that one part,
which is the one part.
which it needs to be widely available. And
Okay.
It needs to be, that's the problem.
But how do you go from not widely available to widely available? I think the answer is patience.
I don't think it is. I think it needs to have some form of infrastructure, technical capability. Think about how the Eurodollar came to be dominated. I mean, you had to have investments in technology. I mean, how can I use a credit card in a foreign country that somehow connects to my local bank and settles through multiple mechanisms? I know Bitcoin is a much more elegant solution to that.
No, but how long did that take to emerge?
Oh, a long time.
Okay, so that's what we're talking about. It's patience. That's the only difference.
Yeah, you had.
But you still haven't solved the other problem. Go ahead.
You had a situation where after World War II, especially the largest economy in the world, basically untouched by the war, had all the gold, had the industrial prowess, was a trade surplus nation, was trying to rebuild Europe by flooding them with dollars. So you had this incredible foundation and network effect to launch this system from, and even then, it already had a legacy stretching back to 1792 when the dollar was defined, right? So it's like you had this long build-up network effect in the United States. Then you had all these wars, and then you had a launch pad from that very strong base. Whereas when you look at something like Bitcoin, is Bitcoin more accepted or less accepted than 10 years ago? And the answer is more accepted. And I had this discussion with George Selgin on I think it was with David Lynn, I forget what show it was, but I was talking with George Selgin, and it's like in any given country, because there's kind of a local monopoly on the currency, unless it's like a failed state, 10 out of 10 merchants will accept the local money. Right? You have a very dense jurisdiction, but as soon as you go outside of that country, that acceptance fades rapidly for most currencies. Even like the Norwegian currency, it's a strong currency, but if you try to find a vendor in New Jersey that's going to just accept physical Norwegian currency, it's almost none. So, other than the dollar and to some extent like the euro and a few others, they quickly lose saleability outside of their own jurisdiction. And then you think, which currencies are somewhat global? Which ones are somewhat globally accepted? So one of them is the dollar. That's number one. It's got the entrenched network effect, the most liquidity, the biggest capital markets, rule of law, launched by the biggest economy, entrenched network effects, deals in the Middle East, everything that kind of like fed the network effect, and then it becomes self-sustaining. Another one would be gold. If you bring a gold coin with you, especially like a sovereign gold coin, which gives it some degree of authentication and easy verification. If you bring a gold coin, a gold eagle with you, almost anywhere in the world, you can find a buyer without much slippage. You might not be able to go to a coffee shop and get a gold coin, but you can find someone within some degree of blocks that'll give you a reasonable amount of value for that gold coin. You can get it convertible pretty easily. Euro is pretty good. Silver is okay. And Bitcoin is already in the top 10. It might be number 5 or something, but at the bare minimum, it's in the top 10. And that's despite the fact that it's a 14-year-old currency. And so unlike the dollar or the euro, it doesn't have any sort of like local monopoly where it has this very dense degree of acceptance. I mean, maybe now El Salvador is an exception. but you don't really have these dense areas of acceptance. Instead, it's a digital currency that you can bring in many places around the world, especially urban cities, and it's already a top 10 currency by saleability, despite no monopoly, nobody enforcing it, and despite the fact that it's still very young and the trend is up.